Hello and welcome to the Digital PR Podcast. I'm Steve Baker and my co-host Lou is off doing the rather more important job of raising a tiny human. But the show must go on. We're in between seasons at the moment, but thought we'd give you all a little treat by bringing back our mini episodes throughout June and July. We'll be jumping into all of PR Land's hottest topics, as we always do, and hearing from members of the Propellernet PR team on everything from pitching to personality types. So get the kettle on, get those headphones charged, and make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any of our episodes. Delighted to be joined by the wonderful Lena, who is a senior digital PR executive with us at Propellernet. Thank you for joining us, Lena. How are you? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you for having me.
A pleasure. I think it's your first time on the podcast, so it's a
Yeah.
delight to have you, particularly as you're from the wonderful Hamburg in Germany, and you have a specialism, understandably, within the German market. So
Yeah.
before we get into that, as it is your first time, would you mind telling me and the listeners a little bit about yourself and your career history?
Yeah, of course. As you mentioned, I grew up in Hamburg, which I can definitely recommend as your next travel destination. And I moved to the UK after I did my A levels, so quite a long time ago now, 8 years ago. And yeah, it was never the plan to move, but obviously I loved it here so much, so never returned to Germany. And I studied media and communication management. So that was kind of my first bit of exposure to public relations, I would say. And during my degree, I also tried to sort of do something good for my CV, so get some work experience and looked into getting an internship. So I did an internship in digital PR at a London-based agency, and that was sort of my first exposure to digital PR in general. Didn't really know that much about it before, but really, really enjoyed my internship. And we moved to Brighton after a few years, and that's kind of when I was looking at a new challenge. And obviously, Propellernet is based in Brighton, so that was kind of felt like a natural move to then sort of look into joining Propellernet. And yeah, I've been here for 6 months now, really enjoying it. That's everything
Ah,
so far.
I can't believe you've been here 6 months already, and I mean
I
this in the best
know.
possible way. It feels like you've been here for a long time, which is always a great sign. And now we're coming into the
Yeah.
we've done our long, hard winter in Brighton, and now it comes
Yeah.
into its own. And we're recording this in the height of summer, possibly the hottest day of the year so far. Certainly one of them. Beautiful day.
Yeah.
It's the best place to be, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Brighten the summer. There's nothing better. Very excited for the next few months.
Good stuff. You mentioned your internship, and yeah, sort of the path that you've been on. But I was just
Mhm.
interested because one of the lovely things about working with kind of a range of people from a range of different backgrounds and countries is the variety of kind of stories into how we got to where we are now.
Mhm.
Was there anything like basically ultimately the question in a nutshell is like, why did you get into digital PR? Like, how did you find yourself getting into digital PR? Was there anything that like
Yeah.
particularly drew towards it from your studies or after you finish your studies, or yeah, how did that come about?
Not really, to be honest. I feel like it was kind of by accident a little bit. And I think it's the same for a lot of people in the industry. But
Mm.
yeah, as I mentioned, I was kind of trying to get work experience, and I feel like digital PR, it feels very niche. So I didn't really know that much about it before. And it was mainly because I was looking for internships, and I found this particular one where they were looking for a German speaker. And obviously, me being from Germany, that was very appealing. And yeah, I just applied and I started working there. And I got to know digital PR and what it's about and kind of the process. And I really, really enjoyed it. And I think for me specifically, the combination of obviously speaking English, but then being able to use my native language and sort of like my insights into what the media landscape is like in Germany, obviously growing up there, knowing what works, what people are interested in, that was a really nice combination. And I think that made it really appealing for me. I think in general, I was always kind of drawn to media And that's why I decided to study media and communication management in the end. I was also considering journalism for a while. So, yeah, I was definitely kind of drawn to that corner. But I think digital PR in general was a bit more by accident, I would say, because I got into that internship. So, yeah.
Yeah. It makes sense because it was similar for me in the way that like I studied, but not like specifically media, but like literature and film, and I was always drawn to the media. And then when I moved to Brighton, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Digital PR didn't even exist in its current form, but I just bumped
Mm,
into an old uni contact who'd started working in PR, and he sorted me out. He basically said like, oh, you get to like read the news every day, you get to do writing, you get to come up with ideas, you get to like present. And I was like, oh, I like talking and having attention. I like the media. I like creativity. I like writing, and it sort of all came together like that. That's why I
yeah,
think it's, there's such a lot of variety. It's quite easy to fall into and then carve out
yeah,
like your
definitely.
niche, your specialism within. So that makes perfect sense. Let's talk
Yeah.
about one of your specialisms. It's not your only one, of course, because you're brilliant at a lot of things, Lena, as I've come to see and know in the last 6 months. But you mentioned your internship. They were looking for kind of German speakers, and obviously it was a great string to your bow, having that language skill and an understanding the German news cycle. So really, I want to know from you, because you've shared a lot with the team and showcased your expertise a lot. But what would you say the kind of the main differences between the German and the UK media landscape?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest differences is the way we approach journalists. I would say in general, it's a lot more formal, and it's always sort of the best practice in Germany to kind of use a more formal language than in the UK. And I know Germans are kind of known for being maybe a little bit more cold in general, but it's definitely true if you're reaching out to someone, there's not like, I think people don't really enjoy small talk that much. It's more about getting to the point, laying out the facts. And yeah, in general, it's a lot more formal. Like, for example, we use the last name instead of the first name to approach a journalist. So that's definitely one of the biggest differences. I would also say longer lead times. So I think the posting frequency online is a lot lower than it is in the UK, and therefore turnaround takes a lot longer. Reactor stories are a lot more difficult because of that as well. So yeah, just definitely plan ahead if you're pitching a story, and yeah, don't be impatient. It can take quite a while sometimes. So yeah, we don't normally see a lot of coverage in the first week when we start outreaching compared to the UK. So that's definitely one of the biggest differences, I would say.
Why do you think that is? Is that just like less journalists or less pressure on the journalists to post, like, in terms of frequency, or is
Mm,
it just always been that way?
I mean, since I've kind of started working in the industry, it's always been that way. And I think because the traditional media is a lot bigger still in Germany than it is in the UK, that's definitely quite a big difference. And then I would also say because journalists are less reliant on pitches from PRs, they do a lot more of their own research, which is obviously a lot more time consuming. I mean, in the UK, sometimes I literally see like the press release that we sent them just online, like hardly anything has been changed. So I think in Germany that's not as common, so it's just more time consuming. But yeah, that's my guess why it's like that.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, it does differ from country to country. But before you joined,
Mm,
and obviously I've been teaching us a lot about how it's done. I always found Germany one of the hardest countries, and it's become kind of
yeah,
to get coverage and links from. And yeah, it's become clear as to why that is the case, like since having
yeah.
you on the team. But with your understanding of the German news cycle and your expertise there, has it made it easier, or has it changed things in terms of how you pitch to other European countries? Can you apply any learnings from Germany, or is it kind of, do you approach it in a completely bespoke way for Germany?
I think it's definitely shown me how different markets can be. Having an understanding of the UK market, for example, or US as well, compared to Germany, it just kind of shows that all these markets are so individual. And I think there's definitely a massive advantage in having someone on board who knows the media landscape quite well, and have someone maybe from that country definitely invest in like translation and localization. It just makes a huge difference, especially if there's like certain KPIs for each individual market. I think to be able to hit them, it's definitely worth it to invest in that. But it just, yeah, I mean, I know from personal experience and from my work at my previous agency that Germany and France are, for example, quite similar in terms of the
Mhm.
market, a lot more than the UK. But yeah, I think it just kind of shown me how different markets are, and that we just kind of need to keep that in mind, and that we can't just copy and paste and just sort of outreach to everyone with the same content, especially if we have different KPIs for each market.
Yeah, again, makes perfect sense. In fact, like a peek behind the curtain. We had a
Yeah.
catch up earlier on one of our clients, and we were going through an idea, and you were sort of saying, "I'm not sure this will work. This one particularly will work that well for the German
Mm,
market." And in the past, before you joined, we probably would have thought, "Yeah, okay, like we'll pitch it there and we'll like change it a little
mm,
bit." But it's really, there are no shortcuts ultimately, and why would there be?
yeah.
Every country is different, so finding what works for each and sort of having a unique and bespoke approach for each, really really important, and it's paid dividends so far, sort of having you on the team, which is brilliant. I mean, I'm constantly fascinated in how digital PR is practiced and perceived in different
Hmm.
countries. We know it's quite mature in the UK, in that there's a lot of agencies, a lot of pitches, a lot of campaigns.
Yeah.
Journalists are very au fait with what we're trying to achieve. What does it look like in Germany? Give us an idea of the digital PR landscape in Germany.
Yeah. Very different, I would say. I mean, I feel like we're definitely behind in terms of digital PR. But at the same time, there seems to be a lot of untapped potential. So it's not necessarily bad. It's just digital PR is not really as much of a thing as it is in the UK. So I feel like a lot of the times journalists don't really understand what we're doing or why we're sending them pictures or campaigns. And there are definitely a lot less agencies that sort of offer digital PR as part of their SEO strategy, which can make it quite difficult to get links. And I think that's why it's so known that Germany is one of the hardest markets to secure links, because we are, in that sense, like really behind. So yeah, there's still a lot more to be done. And obviously, Germany is such a massive market and so important for so many businesses. So there's so much potential that can be done. But yeah, it's a lot more behind than, for example, in the UK.
Makes sense. I mean, how many like, because I'm from the UK and know all about the media landscape here. How many like regions are there in Germany? There's quite a few different like regions, and there's a lot of regionals from what I
Yeah,
can see as well.
yeah. So many regionals. I mean, it's a huge country, and yeah, like there's so many regionals. That's why like any sort of regional data or any regional content does normally quite well,
Mm,
because we can, yeah, just contact endless journalists in terms of like
mm.
the regional publications.
You mentioned about because I don't speak German, I can go in and sort of see your pitches to Germany without fully understanding them. But with all of your kind of knowledge and like you mentioned the being more formal, um,
Hmm.
but how does your knowledge sort of affect your pitches and your outreach? So for example, do you have like a smaller pool of journalists you go to and you're a little bit more selective? Is the structure of the pitch email kind of different? Like, is there anything you can kind of tell us about how you approach it in terms of pitching and outreaching?
Yeah, I think in terms of pitches, for example, I just try and make sure to kind of get straight to the point. So, as I said, for example, I mean, just the intro is a lot more formal. So, for example, we use the last name for most of them, unless you have like a personal relationship and you're in contact with them quite closely. Otherwise, I would always start with the last name instead of the first name, like we do in the UK. And then I don't even do anything like, how are you? I hope your day has been great, anything like that. No small talk, just kind of straight into the story. And I try and keep it quite short and yeah, have bullet points to kind of highlight the most important results of the study, for example, a small table maybe, but just really keeping it short. And then obviously all the important information is also in the press release. But yeah, just kind of get straight to the point. Don't leave anything too vague. It's just we all know that journalists don't have a lot of time, but in Germany, I think it's really valued if you just kind of get straight to the point and it's really obvious what we're trying to send them. And I think including the why is also really important because, as I said, digital PR, like a lot of journalists don't understand why we send them stuff and why we send them pictures. So for them to understand why we're doing a certain campaign or why we looked into certain research, I think is really important. But yeah.
Yeah, there's sort of an even more critical eye, I suppose,
Yeah.
because you talked about that. So there's like got to be robust source, but also like why are we doing this? And yeah,
Mm.
the getting straight to the point, really important. Bizarrely, I find that really easy on emails, but very difficult in conversations. So I think if I was ever to like meet journalists in Germany, I'd probably like waffle on too much. I'd be like, what is this guy saying? That was obviously if I could speak German.
Yeah, that would help.
So that's the kind of the approach in terms of like pitching outreach, but like kind of coming back from that, the ideas themselves, what
Mhm.
types of campaigns, what types of themes, topics, etc., would you say perform the best in the German market?
Yeah, so I think a safe bet is always anything super data heavy. As I said, like journalists, they're super critical a lot of the times. So anything that has a lot of data with a solid methodology and credible sources is like your key to for them to even consider it. So
Hmm.
that's super important. I think in terms of themes and topics, in my experience, like anything business related, education, tech as well, and relationships and dating have done really well so far. I would stay away from anything sports related. I found that super difficult to get coverage in the past. So yeah, that seems to be quite a difficult topic. And as we mentioned earlier, because there's so many regionals, anything to do with regional data is great as well. And they seem to love city comparison. So either if it's negative or positive, they love comparisons. So yeah, that seems to work quite well. And yeah, topical relevance. I mean, we obviously do that in the UK as well, but to kind of understand why we're doing it, why is it relevant for them, why should they write about it, that sort of applies to Germany as well. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think those are the main campaign types and unique data as well, I would say. So any surveys have done really well in the past.
Nice. Some good tips. So what do you think it is about the sport side of things? Obviously, that's not, like I'm sure there are some sporting campaigns that could work, but
Mm,
we're talking about your experience as well, and it's good to know that as a topic. I think it's just quite a tough topic generally to
yeah.
get coverage with. But do you think is there any reason why you found it more difficult in Germany? Because Germany's great at sports. We're like recording this at the height of the Euros taking place in Germany. The team have just won the group. You'd think like a nice positive sporting story, they'd go, "Oh, this is great." Or is it that they just take sport very seriously in Germany and they're like, "No, we're not going to play with this."
To be honest, I'm not sure exactly why it's so difficult. I think, I mean, in my experience, normally when I get feedback on any sort of sporting campaigns, it's normally that the journalists who write about sport are really focused on current events. So, for example, the Euros, they're just going to be focused on that. And it's really difficult to get them interested in anything that doesn't have to do anything with current events that are going on in the sporting world. So,
Hmm.
unless there's like a big lifestyle angle to it, for example, where you can contact other journalists, um, I found I find it really difficult to get them interested. And yeah, I've had little success so far, I must say. And I think that's like the only reason that comes to mind. I don't really know why else? They're not
Yeah.
interested. But I think they're just so focused on what's going on and like the games and write about that they don't really cover anything, any campaigns or anything like that.
Maybe that's why they're so good at sports and they tend to get to finals, win tournaments,
Maybe.
particularly in the football, because they're so focused on the tournament and like, what we got to do to win. And so, yeah, whereas in the UK, we tend to sort of debate too much maybe, and it's all a bit sort of silly or, yeah, etc. Final thing, Lena, we kind of tend to ask, we're obsessed with top tips and lists, but I think particularly in this instance, it's going to be useful. So I'm going to challenge you / ask you to give us your top 3 do's and don'ts for someone who wants to
Yeah.
try land coverage in Germany or German speaking countries.
Yeah, so I think in terms of do's, definitely plan ahead. As I said, like the lead times can be quite long, and if there's anything tied to like certain events, for example, like Christmas, just start super, super early. So yeah, you can make sure you've got enough time to secure that coverage. Be patient because as I said, like the lead times can be long. It can be frustrating if you don't see any coverage for maybe 2 weeks, but that can be super, super normal in the German speaking market. So yeah, just be patient. I'm sure the coverage will come. And I would say the third one, set appropriate goals. As I said, like the market is so different to the UK, and especially if you're communicating that with your clients, just make sure that they're aware that the market is very different, and you can't really set the same KPIs for the German speaking market as you do maybe for the English speaking markets. So yeah, just make sure you're communicating that and sort of change the KPIs appropriately to the different market. And then I think in terms of don'ts, as I said, don't do too much small talk. Just get straight to the point. Don't keep things vague. Just kind of be quite direct, and make sure it's very obvious for them what you've done and what are sort of the key findings of your study. I think another one is don't include anything too clickbaity, like sensationalist angles don't work really well. They come across as quite tacky in the German media landscape, and journalists are normally not interested in that sort of stuff. So just keep it more plain and simple, and don't try to include any clickbait. And don't spam the journalists. I've been blocked a few times where I don't know, you just send up follow emails too soon and they don't really appreciate that. So I would say in general, as a rule, in Germany, I normally wait at least 7 days to send my follow-up email. I know in the UK it's a lot sooner, but in Germany, it seems to work better because, yeah, as I said, like digital PR is not such a thing. So journalists just feel like you're spamming them with the stuff that they don't care that much about. So yeah, you get blocked quite easily.
Some brilliant tips there. And I know you've gone through a lot of this with the team, but yeah, it's a good reminder for me, and I think will be brilliant for our listeners as well, because it's yeah, you have so much knowledge, and I've seen the kind of coverage that you secure there. So listeners will have to take our word for it, but you get on some of the biggest German titles with regularity, which is brilliant to see. So definitely take Lena's tips on board. Lena, thank you so much for joining, for sharing your thoughts on that. It's been super interesting, and it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast for the first time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.